Around this time last year, the governments of Kenya and the UK co-hosted the first ever Global Disability Summit in London. Chams Media, in collaboration with KTN News, brought you every bit of it under the hashtag Leave No One Behind. On this show, what has changed 1 year on?
We have the Innovation to Inclusion, which is basically a big program for the country.
When it comes to inclusive education, we have challenges. In fact, I think we've gone down.
Is the campaign getting the intended traction? What are the gains so far? What are the challenges? What is the way forward? But first, here is our fact sheet.
The World Health Organization defines disabilities as an umbrella term covering impairments, activity limitations, and participation restrictions. About 15% of the world's population lives with some form of disability, of whom 2 to 4% experience significant difficulties in functioning. In Kenya, it is estimated that the population of people with disabilities is about 4 million. National Special Needs Education Survey, most prevalent disabilities in Kenya are multiple disabilities at 31%, visual impairment at 20%, hearing impairment at 10%, and physical impairment at 9%. The National Council for Persons with Disabilities is a state corporation that promotes and protects equalization of opportunities and realization of human rights of people with disabilities in Kenya. It is worth noting that disability is not inability. Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno is a rear head of state who uses a wheelchair, stirring hope for people with disability worldwide.
All right, a function held recently at the National Council for Persons with Disability hailed efforts made by the government of Kenya in collaboration with development partners and stakeholders to enhance inclusivity in socio-economic development. During the function, attended by the outgoing British High Commissioner to Kenya, Nick Haley, a new initiative to boost inclusivity in education was launched. Elijah Mwangi has more from the function.
The Global Disability Summit in London in July 2018 yielded 170 sets of ambitious commitments to increase disability inclusion and tackle stigma in low-income countries. 1 year on, key stakeholders gather at the National Council for Persons with Disabilities in Westlands, Nairobi, to celebrate the achievements the country has made towards disability inclusion and to reflect on what more needs to be done.
A very good opportunity for us to look at where we've been, and I think it is very important. Somebody has mentioned that these commitments were made on behalf of all of us, by the government. So in terms of implementing these commitments, it is all of us, both the private and the civil society, the donors, and all the partners.
And I'm here today in my last week as High Commissioner to encourage everybody to keep up the energy and the momentum and to take this work forward in the years ahead. I'm also here to launch 2 new initiatives funded by the UK to break down barriers, to get people into jobs, to promote inclusion, and to ensure that nobody misses out on the opportunity to fulfill the potential that they have in their lives.
The British High Commissioner launched 2 key initiatives, Innovation to Inclusion and Inclusion Works. The 2 new launched UK-funded programs shall bring together a consortium of influential partners who will work to ensure that persons with disabilities, a critically underutilized talent pool, are actively recruited and retained in meaningful employment in the private sector, a key component in economic empowerment.
When we talk about the 5% quota on employment for persons with disability, we need a policy on recruitment and job placement for persons with disabilities. Because if we have a law, but there's no policy which monitors on that, then simply we are not going to really get what we want.
Another key area that was highlighted during the function was data for persons with disabilities. Statistics and information on persons with disabilities has been scanty for long. It is worth noting that in the forthcoming census, Kenya will for the first time be using Washington Group of Questions to identify the number of persons with disabilities in the country.
Questions have been made in a friendly way, that when these questions have been framed, and we have carried out this among them, there was a pre-census testing that has been done. For example, you do not just go straight and ask persons with disability, what is your type of disability? It is put in a more friendly way. It is framed in a way that is internationally accepted, in a way that the stigma is reduced.
I would like to urge that during the coming census next month, anybody who has a child or even an adult within their household who is disabled in one way or another, to please bring them forward, let them be counted. So in terms of statistics, we have the right statistics in place. And with the right statistics, the government and the various stakeholders were then able to plan accordingly based on the numbers which are there with different disabilities.
Like many other areas, Kenya has put in place progressive policy and legal frameworks with the intention of improving lives of persons with disabilities. But implementation of these and many other policy and legal frameworks have been weak. This is what stakeholders hope will change, even as Kenya stays true to the commitments made during the Global Disability Summit.
As a disability fraternity between the Kenyan government, the state actors and non-state actors, we must always work together. We must be able to put our resources together. We must work from the same place. We must have the same thinking. Let's avoid going into, our own cocoonism, where you think everybody has a niche that has been cut out for him or her. There's always space for us to work together.
Now, some time back, we brought you the story of Kenyan-British Paralympian Anne Wafula's Strike, who is an advocate of the rights of persons with disability. She shared her story of how her community in Webuye, Bungoma County, had rejected her, but her father would not listen to superstitions. This is her story.
And then the good thing also is my wheelchair is my wheelchair comes apart.
Anne Wafula's Strike is an influential personality in the UK when it comes to championing the rights of persons with disability. She is a wheelchair racer and a Paralympian, the dream many sports personalities would like to achieve. We spent time with her at Harlow Leisure Zone, where she goes for training. Harlow is located in Essex, southeast of London. With her bubbly character, she appears to have a bubbly life, but behind that cheerful face is a story that will shock you.
The traditionalists actually, they expected my father to abandon me.
The community was very hostile to my family.
Yes, this is Mihu village in Webuye, Bungoma County, where Anne was born as a normal child. But she was later to be declared an outcast after contracting polio at the age of 2.
In the 70s, being born in a cultural way where people did not understand diseases, there was no technology or there was no science to explain what was happening to me. People had two minds. So the Christians or the religious people believed that I'd been cast by God. Our family had been cast. The traditionalists, those ones who did not believe in God, who believed in tradition, they believed that I'd been bewitched.
Anne's father, Paul Wafula, An ex-military warrant officer explains the ordeal he went through.
We tried to get her to Kaimosi hospital, and the doctor at Kaimosi said he could not diagnose any serious disease. So the community around was so hostile to my family and to my wife.
Because they were afraid the curse would spread to everyone.
I had a 5-roomed house thatched with grass. They wanted to burn it. I ignored them and took my family to Nairobi.
My father took me to the hospital, Kenyatta Hospital then. And then that's when they said, oh, Mr. Wafula, your daughter has contracted polio. And it was a mystery, because nobody knew what was happening. And so after that diagnosis, they started to take me to Kabete Hospital, and they fitted me with the calipers and crutches, for me to start walking. And then I went to Joyland School for the physically handicapped. That is where I actually got my primary education. Then from there I went to Kereri Girls High School, where I did my O and A levels. Then I went to Moi University and graduated as a teacher.
It's a long story, but fast forward, and Anne would be the proverbial cat with 9 lives. Come 14th October 2014, and the village girl who was to be abandoned because of a disability status the community considered a curse was among personalities receiving honorary titles at the Buckingham Palace.
This one is an MBE medal. It's a special medal that was given to me by the Queen for my services to disability sport and charity work. That is why I was given this. Now I'm a member of the British Empire.
Congratulations.
So I'm not just Anne, but I am Anne Wafula Strike, a member of the British Empire. Yani mtoto wa Wafula sasa ni member wa British Empire.
So I tell people that parents who are afraid of their children being disabled, they should come out forcefully and bring up their children, because their children, they are only physically disabled.
Anne Wafula's story leads us to a short break. When we return...
But then what we are asking the central bank to do is to emboss these bars further.
Welcome back. We are reflecting on the gains made so far, 1 year on since Kenya and the UK co-hosted the first ever Global Disability Summit in London. Nominated Senator Isaac Mwaura, who represents persons with disability in the Senate, was among the moderators at the function. Elijah Mwangi had a one-on-one interview with him on what has changed.
We are looking at Global Disability Summit 1 year on to deal with stigma and discrimination. Where are we as a country from your assessment?
First and foremost, I think it's to say generally that people with disabilities are more accepted in Kenya comparative to other countries in Africa. That I can assure you. We are a leader, and we need to do more, especially in the periphery, from the center, that is from Nairobi. The awareness now needs to move into the villages. What have we done after the 2018 Global Disability Summit? Yes. I think we are still doing it. We can't say that there's a major shift because this is not something you can measure 1 year down the line. It's something that it will be longer term, So there's no specific, threshold that we can say we reduce by 20 or 30%. But certainly, I think when I listen to the conversations of Kenyans, I hear them mentioning persons with disabilities as an integral part and parcel of the society. So one of the other key components I can say that I've been able to push in the Senate is to have the new currencies inclusive of blind people, people with visual impairment. If you compare this note here, and you compare this note here, you see this note here, there is no distinctive mark. You can confuse it with the 50 bob. But here there are 5 bars here. Okay. These 5 bars, they are for the visually impaired people. And also the numbers. You see this from far. It's still brown, but the numbers, 1,000, you read from far. So for those who are low vision, you don't need to, you look and you see, but here you squint. But then what we are asking the central bank to do is to emboss these bars further so that they are more pronounced. It's a way of fighting discrimination and to ensure financial inclusion. You know, okay. That's another big achievement.
Inclusive education was one of the commitments that were made during the Global Disability Summit. What do you have to say about inclusive education?
When it comes to inclusive education, we have challenges. Okay. In fact, I think we've gone down. We launched the inclusive education policy by His Excellency to the President. It's actually called a Special Needs Education Policy, yes. Specifically focusing on persons with disabilities. But then the funding for schools, the funding for special schools has been reduced. So in terms of inclusive education, we have not really done much. But I have seen efforts, for example, by, say, Kilimanjaro Blind Trust, yes. trying to provide the Orbit reader for people who are totally blind, for example. That is a positive, but it needs to be taken up by the government, so that in the government laptop program, this is part and parcel of what they will procure for those who are visually impaired. And I've made those calls very clear and to the ministry. So that we need to do more.
Now let's shift gears a bit from the education sector to economic empowerment, which is critical because this is where we talk of opportunities.
We are yet to see proper, targeted programs in terms of, persons with disabilities. Again, this is an area that we still can do more. There are two ways of doing it. It's either people are doing starting their own businesses, and yes, indeed, we are doing better in terms of AGPO, access to government procurement opportunities, preferential procurement. That is a regime that is not resident in many of the countries in the world. So it needs to be measured. I mean, whether there's an increase, what kind of supplies are given to such groups of people, and what is the uptick. What we have seen, though, is government saying that at least for the 30%, at least 2% must be persons with disabilities. And we do recognize that then there is a lot of capacity issue around the companies that are owned by persons with disabilities because they are not as empowered. But at least there's that policy measure yes. in place. Over and above that is the issue of job placement. Yes. Because that's also what you do with regards to distribution of wealth in pure economics. And we have seen concerted effort around companies like Safaricom, L'Oreal that I work with, the Barclays Bank, even recently a company called ShopRite. Yes. The county governments like Uasin Gishu, they are employing persons with disabilities. So that, I think there's a positivity towards that end. What we need to do, though, is to ensure that there's proper databasing. There are databases that can monitor how many people with disabilities have been given jobs. Because, so that it is not just token include here and there. It's good to do it, but it needs to be monitored. But generally, in terms of the percentage of persons with disabilities, for example, in government, it's still very low.
In terms of supporting some of the initiatives, especially someone who has a disability coming up with an initiative, are we doing it right in terms of supporting some of these initiatives?
The most important thing is the hub being developed at the University of Nairobi. Okay. That already there are conversations with people like Caroline Holloway and Dr. Richard Ayer. And that is already in motion. So we hope that then through that Disability Innovation Hub, we will not only have solutions around tech, but also in terms of assistive devices. That for me is a longer term kind of project, okay. And the commitment of government in terms of core funding is critical.
So apart from what you've done, anything which is coming up and people out there, especially people with disabilities, ought to know that is coming up in the Senate?
First, we are going to have something called Coordinate. Coordinate is a county disability oversight and networking tours. So once every 2 or so months, we'll be going to various counties to meet persons with disabilities, the county assemblies, the governors, and whatever. Number two, we are also monitoring in terms of legislative proposals that we are making. For example, proposing the changing of the Constitution, the amendment of the Article 54, to remove the word progressive, because this word progressive in the reservation of employment for 5% to persons with disabilities in appointed and elected positions has been used to deny opportunity, because how progress is progress, how much progress is progress.
Thank you so much, Elijah, for that informative interview. From the private sector, let us now hear from Safaricom Limited, which played a key role in the London summit. What is the company's commitment?
our doors are open for differently abled members of society to work in Safaricom. And we are one of the companies that have made this part of how we work and what we want to achieve as an organization. We set ourselves a target that by 2021, we shall have 5% of our staff component being people who are differently abled. Last year, when we had the summit in London, we were at 1.7%. This year, we are now at 2.5%. So it means we are making some strides. We're continuing to live our promise, and we're continuing to make Safaricom a work environment where, as long as you're capable in any way, shape, or form, you'll find something to do in Safaricom, which is our promise to our society.
And that marks the end of our show. Be sure to join us next week, Thursday, same time, as we begin our 4-part series, Connecting Kenyans, a series that will focus on the impact of improved network connectivity in unserved and underserved areas of Kenya. Till then, I'm Alex Chamada, and bye-bye for now.